This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
Welcome back to the show. We are honored to have Dr. William Roy Newman joining us here again today from Seacoast Counseling Centers. We'll get to know a little bit of his background and, of course, all that he's been doing and helping so many people with. First, as a licensed psychologist for over 41 years, licensed clinical social worker, 46 years, and many more. We're going to get to that, but let's say hello to our guest. How are you doing today, Dr. Will?
I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. And where do you hail from?
My office is in Amesbury, Massachusetts, which is on the North Shore of Boston, where I've been practicing for 47 years in different cities north of Boston. My office currently is in Amesbury, Massachusetts,
Beautiful.
close to the New Hampshire border.
All right, great. Well, let's talk a little about the work you do as a licensed psychologist and again, all your other titles. We would love to hear a little bit about, yourself before we begin today's show. Thank you.
I started becoming interested in the field of psychology and counseling whenever I did internships in my master's degree. That was a 3-year master's degree on the North Shore of Boston. And I was counseling mothers who were unwed with children who were enduring a lot of stress with the challenges of life of being a parent and a single parent. And I noticed that by listening with patience and kindness, developing a rapport, the children and the mothers began to open up and feel warm and safe and tell me more and more about what was happening in their life that was challenging and stressful and confusing. And I continued that for a year in one internship, and then I did another internship working with the Department of Youth Services in Massachusetts, working with children who were having difficulties in school, delinquency, and juvenile delinquent adolescents who were breaking the law and having difficulty. And what I noticed is that all of the children and teens with the psychological, emotional, painful symptoms had grown up in an environment with parents who had limited knowledge about how they needed to be parented with gentleness and kindness and an ability to communicate so that the children would be seen and heard and understand, feeling safe, feeling guided, feeling supported, being delighted in.
Yeah.
And that influenced me when I went to Boston University to do my doctorate degree.
And if you don't mind me interrupting, as a child, though, this also inspired you. I know, the Bible was very big in teaching, but you also had some obstacles, right? Growing up with parents, you said, who didn't have parents.
Yes, that's correct. And so I was able to be very empathetic.
Yes, that's the word.
With the children and adolescents and compassionate because I understood it, because I understood what it was like growing up with parents who were orphans, and later in my adult life, understanding that it was most traumatic for them. And therefore, my compassion and empathy was coming from a place of knowledge and experience too, which helped me to understand what they needed and what they wanted for safety and trust and confidence and self-worth. And I decided that there was a red thread theme in everyone that I was counseling, that there were parenting limitations based on parents who were traumatized, which traumatized the children.
Yeah, because their symptoms and
Therefore,
behaviors spill over to their children and then their children. It's a whole trickle down chain of what can happen. And it takes someone, usually, some go in the wrong direction, some go in a positive direction, as you have, to overcome that and realize, wow, I could help people heal. I've dealt with this. I understood what my parents went through and why their behaviors were their behaviors. And I'm sure I still love them, right? Because they didn't know better.
yes, most certainly.
I can
And
empathize with that too.
many of us can. There's no perfect parents. And sadly, some parents are traumatized because of their childhood. So therefore, they may be more prone to making more mistakes.
Yeah.
So I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the development of healthy child and adolescent psychological development through family life education, how to communicate to children and parents to give them the essential attachment needs that are absolutely obliterated and destroyed when there's trauma, as I said earlier. A child first needs safety and protection.
Hmm.
Second, guidance, direction, support, encouragement. Day-to-day experiences of being delighted in, with laughter and smiles and hugs and kisses and
Hmm.
cheerfulness and playfulness. Without these experiences, a child doesn't experience the psychological development to feel internally safe.
Hmm.
So there's feelings of fear and insecurity causing anxiety disorders, or interpretations from miscommunications or reactivity from parents who were traumatized, that the child interprets I'm wrong or I'm bad because my mom or dad are angry at me and they're rejecting at me, or they may yelling at me or scream at me or one another.
Yeah.
And the child begins to feel, if I am bad and feel bad,
Yeah.
if I feel bad, I am bad. If I feel wrong, I am wrong. And that leads to the master emotion that undermines and erodes child development self-esteem, and that's shame.
Yeah.
The child feels the shame and doesn't understand what it is. It creates self-doubt and worthlessness. Added to that, if it doesn't stop and it continues, and there's not safety and protection and delight and encouragement and support and guidance, there's also an experience of hopelessness and helplessness. I'm alone. How do I
Yeah.
navigate this life that I'm in whenever I'm always feeling bad because I'm not ever good enough and my parents don't love me, which
Ugh.
leads to depression. It's so
Wow.
sad to see the prevalence of childhood and adolescent depression. And for some, that's why they turn to the use and abuse of drugs and alcohol, or juvenile delinquency. They're acting out the anger, or not going to school, or not paying attention at school. And they're labeled with ADHD when it's not ADHD. The symptoms of ADHD, losing concentration and
Yeah.
attention, but it's not an organic uh, neurological problem. That's the origin is in biology. It's psychological. It's high anxiety that prevents attention in the classroom and at school, or it's anger and it's acting out the anger at the parents in the classroom with teachers or other students. So I developed this parenting education program, wrote my dissertation on it.
That was at
And
Boston University. Yep, we'll get back to
Boston
that.
University, yes, and began to teach it in different schools and churches. And then just I took a position after I was working with the adolescents in a home for the support and treatment of people who were diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Wow.
And many of them had the diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. And I noticed when I spent enough time paying attention to them and listening to them, they used to line up. I would see one at a time, and they would set their times when I would go to their group home. And at first, they were frightened, and the symptoms that appeared to be psychotic were present. But the more time I spent with them and the more safety, the more they began to smile. And then their tone of voice changed. And it appeared that and sounded as though they had a more adult voice versus a child voice. And they weren't displaying any psychotic symptoms.
Wow. So they were learning
Yeah.
to trust you. And that
Yes,
says so much when you bond with someone compared to someone just coming in to talk to them that could make them nervous and scared. Absolutely. That anxiety of talking to someone new, but then developing a relationship with you where they could trust you. That's I got goosebumps. That's something different and that definitely different for them that you were there to help listen. So what happened with some of these?
exactly. And so they began to feel better, and then they began to say, I don't want to take this medication anymore. Yeah, it makes me feel bad. And
Amazing.
there was a very kind, friendly psychiatrist who was giving the medication. And I told him about that, and he smiled, and uh, he was open to it, but and understood it to a degree. Uh, however, based on whatever he was hired for
Yeah.
as for prescribing medication, it didn't stop. And however, when I opened a private practice in 3 locations on the North Shore of Boston, Gloucester, Manchester by the Sea, and Danvers, Massachusetts, and I began to get some patients, they were able to say, no, I don't want to take this anymore. And they talked about their complex childhood trauma. And I began to work with them to heal the trauma and the paranoid psychotic symptoms that they were labeled with as paranoid schizophrenia began to subside, and for some, completely stopped, which led me to more curiosity and interest in the field of complex childhood developmental trauma treatment. And I began to specialize in that. And I began to view it in the way that I was viewing the patients with paranoid schizophrenia. When I talked to people who came in and said, do you treat borderline personality disorder? And I said, well, I know what it is. I know what it's written about. And yes, I can treat it. And I'll treat it in a different way than with
Medical
medication.
doctors can. Yep.
Yes. And what I found is all of the people had complex childhood trauma. And sadly, they labeled themselves with this label of borderline personality disorder until they began to understand they have complex childhood trauma causing high anxiety and depression, and that really what their disorder is, your behaviors change at different times, and you weren't born with a borderline personality disorder. You you experience complex trauma that causes a change in behaviors because there may be different parts of your mind that are coping
Yep.
differently for safety and survival.
Mm.
And they began to heal more quickly when I treated them with the treatments that are most effective for treating childhood developmental trauma or complex trauma. And then I began to uh, have more people come to my practice uh, who had symptoms of anxiety and depression. And their stories, some of them had stories that were most shocking and heinous. Uh, and it reminded me of what I learned in history about what happened during World War II when Mengele was experimenting on children and trying to change the electrical circuitry to control them. And some of these people were children who were victims of that from who were adults, but as children they suffered uh, mind control uh, from the CIA called MK Ultra that was originated with the Germanic people who tried to make their children perfect by
Oh
controlling
gosh.
their minds. And then it was the
Mm-hmm.
most evil way that Mengele did during Hitler's time. But some of those people came over in Project Paperclip to the US, and then they taught it to the CIA, and the CIA most evilly and heinously began to do experiments to control children, to influence them, to either traffic drugs or to kill people. And one of the cities that I worked in is called Danvers, Massachusetts. Danvers used to be the origin of Salem, where the Salem witch trials occurred. And I had adults telling me that they're having memories of being ritually abused in satanic ritual abuse, wherein they forced the children to engage in sexual practices
Yeah.
and even harming other children. They forced them uh, to stab another child, or they cut body parts of another children. It sounds extremely unbelievable, and sadly, uh, I began to see more than one victim of that in this same city,
Mm-hmm.
and and then over the years began to see more, and that's the worst trauma I treat. Most people that I treat are from families where there some could be sexual abuse, but it's not MK Ultra ritual abuse or satanic ritual abuse. It's sick parents sexually abusing them,
Mm-hmm.
mother or father, or
Ah.
verbal abuse, or physical abuse, or violence and shouting and screaming. That's the most prevalent. The MK Ultra and the satanic ritual abuse. It's everywhere in the country and in Europe. It started in Europe and it came over here. Uh, and I still see some people, but mostly the people who were victims as children. And I help them to change the harm that was done when they experience developmental childhood
Yeah.
trauma by by healing that biochemical electrical circuitry from the brain and body to unburden the emotional pain from the hurt, the anger, the fear, and the shame. And those who stay with it and do it long enough can and will be healed. And I stayed with this specialty because it came to me from my experience, and I sustained the compassion and the desire, finding out that more people than we like to believe have suffered traumatic childhood developmental trauma.
And I just want to remind everyone that we are here with Dr. William Newman again at Seacoast Counseling Centers. Now, you said this is based in Massachusetts. How many locations do you have currently?
Currently one.
Okay. Is that in New Hampshire
I
then?
started with 3,
Mm-hmm.
and I opened the practice in 1984. And during that time, when I was beginning to see more and more children for complex developmental trauma, I noticed that in the 90s, there was a reaction by groups of people in this country that began to sue therapists, calling it false memory syndrome, where they accused therapists of implanting false memories,
Yeah.
which may have been true in occasional situations, but mostly it wasn't true. And I fortunately was able to discuss this with colleagues through in the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis. One of them was a good friend and colleague, the late Daniel Brown, who who experienced it as well. Another is Corey Hammond in Utah, who had to stop his practice because they were calling his home, whomever that was, who was behind the false memory syndrome, to fight back, to
Wow.
hide their guilt for this heinous sexual abuse of children.
Mm.
And more and more people who come in for anxiety and depression, when they tell me their history, uh, begin to understand this is from my childhood trauma. And the more they heal the childhood trauma, the more the depression and anxiety subsides.
Mm. Well, there's still a lot to talk about. And for those out there who may be just tuning in here with Dr. Will, you also believe in, I love that you are a man of faith. And, at a young
Yes.
age, you mentioned, you started reading the Bible, and that was really considered one of your mentors. But not only, were you, taking the time to do that and to learn about the teachings all recorded in the Bible, but then you also started, you were also playing football. I read that, but you were mentored, you said, by a
Yes.
campus minister, right? And then you kind of inspired because then you were inspired by a reverend, and therefore you started also as ordained Presbyterian minister. Just curious just about that, if you don't mind, just sharing that because you have so many
Yes,
different
yes.
yeah, backgrounds. It's good for people to realize that you are you're very versatile in your beliefs, in your training, in your dedication to helping people from, in all different lives and all from different ways of what you've learned.
Yes, it started before I was at the University of Pittsburgh playing football and met the campus minister who led the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. It started well as a child when I went to church and I became interested in reading the Bible and understanding the love of God and the unconditional love of God and the Holy Spirit, and uh, understanding uh, the gift of God through his son, Jesus Christ, for the forgiveness of sins. And for many people, including myself, it helped to unburden the feelings of shame from any traumatic experiences. And it inspired me, uh, uh, entering the University of Pittsburgh in undergrad. I was aiming to be a physician, but when I went to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes meetings, and I began to hear more teachings
Yeah.
and receive mentoring from a minister at a church on the campus, Bob Long, I began to feel the calling to be a minister. And after I graduated, went on to theological seminary at Gordon Conwell Seminary and got ordained to be a Presbyterian
Wow.
minister, and was planning to do that until I experienced the internships that I told you about
Mm.
and felt the calling to continue the work that I I experienced during these internships. And I integrate it with everybody who wants to hear it. I'm highly respectful to anybody who doesn't, but many do want to ask questions about what the Bible says about that, and why does God allow this to happen, and how could this possibly happen if God loves me? And so I will gladly help people understand what the Bible says about that. And uh, for many people who come in from complex childhood developmental trauma, they have addictions,
Mm.
and they find it most helpful to heal the addictions the more they practice uh, reading the Bible, following the Bible, and praying. It has a profound impact on overcoming addictions.
Mm. And also, I mean, obviously, with your decades of experience with clinical psychology, you're also using energy psychology, which to some may be a misunderstood field. So, can you just share a little bit about how that also can work together in helping a child, a teenager, a parent, a family member with, using energy psychology as well?
Yes, gladly. Energy psychology is a way to unburden, remove, and heal the biochemical electrical conductivity of the traumatic feelings that stay lodged and blocked in the body. The fear, the guilt, the shame, the worthlessness.
Hmm.
And it's done by learning how to clear it with practices such as emotional freedom technique, which is a derivative of Chinese acupuncture, tapping on the meridians. That helps to remove the electrical energy from the traumatic fear and other emotions, or clearing the chakras.
Yep. Which we have, what, seven main chakras, but there's a lot more, I know. I
There's a
don't think we
lot
have time to
more.
get
There's
into
a
that
lot
today.
more from a higher level of consciousness called the
Yes.
overself.
Mm-hmm.
And then uh, and that's called advanced integrative therapy. And then
Mm-hmm.
another one that most like is called heart assisted therapy, wherein uh, they use the breath to imagine uh, the golden white light of God's unconditional love coming through the crown chakra, through the pineal gland, into the throat chakra, into the heart, and
Wow.
filling the heart with this unconditional love. And then imagining as they exhale, it sweeps away the fear, shame, and guilt down the spinal cord, down the tip of the spine, down the legs, and out the feet. And saying the words as you breathe in and exhale,
Mm-hmm.
I deeply and completely love and accept myself. and another inhale and exhale. Just as I am, the way I am, in mind, body, and spirit. And I explained to them that the heart is the seat of the soul.
Yeah.
And it gives, most everyone says, I feel so peaceful and calm when I do this. And it's because it's clearing the heart chakra, literally from broken hearts
Ah,
caused by the rejection
yep.
and the fear and the hurt and the shame and the neglect and the deprivation because of parents who make mistakes,
Yep.
most of
We
whom
all do.
are probably are traumatized from their childhoods.
Yep. And unfortunately, Doctor, we are out of time for today, so we do have to wrap it up and also make sure you give us your contact information so we can reach out to you, please. Thank you.
Yes. My phone number, 978-388-0022. My email, drbillnewman@gmail.com. And my website, Energy Psychologist, Amesbury, AMESBURY .ma.com.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here and for joining us today. And before we close, is there a quote that you would like to share with us today?
The quote will be a biblical one.
Mm-hmm.
Since children falsely and mistakenly believe they're unloved and unlovable and unworthy, the quote is, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. You are unconditionally loved by God through the gift of his Son, Jesus Christ, now and forever, by believing in him.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
And looking forward to the next time we get to connect. You have a fantastic day and enjoy the rest of your week, Doctor. Okay?
Okay, Jill.
Thank you. Bye
Thank you.
bye.
You as well. Bye-bye.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.